Howdy, AP literature friends. Friends? That's how elementary school teachers talk to their kids. Hi, friends. I'm here with today's recording. This is Friday, August 28th. If you were not in the live session, I'm going to go over what you missed. If you were in the live session, there's not really going to be a lot of new information here. So you got you got all the instruction I'm giving for today. So lucky you. Today, I'm going to start on our classroom page like you should and checking out our weekly outline. Click the outline bookmark here. In class today, I really just kind of went over the fact that you have your metaphorical show and tell videos and your getting to know you forms completed. Make sure those are both in. Click the right period to make sure they're submitted. For the show and tell, make sure you just mark it as turned in, and then as long as you've completed it on Flipgrid, you're good to go. But I would like you guys, if you can, to respond to each other a little bit. I'm going to go through and respond to your videos over the today and this weekend. So by Monday, you should see some responses from me at least. But I think it's fun if we respond to each other too. And then the getting to know you form is just that simple Google form that I have posted, and you'll have to fill that out to get it completed. So those are the basics from the agenda. But another thing that I talked about today was our syllabus. I've posted this as an announcement. I'll make sure it's posted for 7th period as well, but I'm going to include a link to it on our weekly outline, so it's all in one place. It will still be here as well if you need it. Before I talk about the syllabus, I want to point out too that I did make an announcement for the class meeting today just so that people would remember. I'm going to try on Monday not to make an announcement, and if the class period starts and nobody's showing up, maybe then I'll go through and post one. But my hope is that you'll just join the meet from our banner. Okay, so our syllabus. This is a long syllabus. It's 6 pages long. I am not going to go over the whole thing in this video because that'd be kind of boring, and you can read it on your own. It needs to be this long since it's an AP literature course, AP course. This goes to the College Board and it gets approved as part of the course audit. So I cover everything on here that College Board would like us to cover on a syllabus, and it'll give you a really good, solid idea of what to expect this year. First of all, sorry, I just had finished my lunch. Got a little frog in my throat. I did not eat a frog for lunch. Anyway, the course is a college course. It takes place of senior English, but it also works for junior class. We used to have AP3 and AP4, and AP3 was language and comp, AP4 was literature and comp. We've cut away that distinction, and you can take either one whenever you sign up for it. But because it's a college level writing course and reading course, there's going to be college level expectations and college level content. On the one hand, the expectations, you're going to understand that you're going to challenge yourself. There's going to be difficult readings, difficult writing assignments, but I'm always here to help you out. So if any of them ever feel overwhelming or you just don't understand what to do, reach out. Okay, I'm 100% here for you. The other side of that, the college level reading side of it, is some of it will be difficult to understand. And in class today, I talked a little bit about how there's times when you can't really articulate what it is that you like about something, or you can't really articulate exactly what's going on, but sometimes you'll just have a feel. Poetry often does this, especially the first time you read a poem. You might come away thinking like, wow, I liked that. And if somebody were to ask you why you liked it or what about it you liked, it might be hard to pin that down. And that's what I kind of associate with feeling the poem. You felt it, and on some level you understood this is joy that you gained from it, right? That you appreciated it, and you don't quite know why. Part of what we're going to do in this class is to get to the why. Figure out what it is about the poem that's making you enjoy it. So if you're ever reading something that's too complicated, just bear with it. Try, right? I'm here to help break it down, and I hope that your classmates can too from their discussions of whatever it might be. But the other side of that, I think I've said that already, but the other side of it is this idea that sometimes the reading is going to be things that make us uncomfortable. Sometimes it's violence, sometimes it's death, oftentimes it's sex. We say as literature teachers, many of us do, that literature is really about 3 things: religion, death, and sex. And they come up over and over again. If you were ever in my classroom in the past years, after the summer, when I would assign normal summer work, we would make posters all over my walls that kind of summarize the chapters from Thomas Foster's How to Read Literature Like a Professor. And in those posters, there'll be at the top a clear chapter name and then a summary of what happened in the chapter. Chapter names, one of them is called It's All About Sex, and my students often chose to make that poster. There's 28 chapters, and we don't always do all the chapters, but that one every year has been up on my wall because people like to make me uncomfortable, I guess. So that chapter in the book, Foster talks about how in literature you can't always write openly about things. Sometimes you have to use, and I had trouble with this word earlier today, allegory, where you write about something in code. Animal Farm is a good example of that, where Orwell's writing about, a system of government where the animals have taken over the farm, and 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But he's really criticizing existing governments in the world at the time, right? He's talking about some of the communist, fascist regimes that have been in the world. So that's one form of allegory. But other times we write about things in code because maybe censorship laws. Victorian England was pretty wildly known for being prudish. So if an author wanted to write about a couple becoming intimate, having a sleepover, I'm doing it too. I'm not talking directly about it. If he wanted to write about a couple having sex, he would maybe, or she would maybe, write instead about the couple having a meal. And the way the meal is described, readers are meant to understand what's really going on, right? And then there's another chapter that follows that one, and I didn't talk about this morning, sorry. I'll talk about it in class sometime. But there's the It's All About Sex chapter, and the second one after is called Accept Sex, meaning that if there is sex in a story, it's often not about sex. Instead, it's about something else, like maybe it's a character growing up, coming of age. Maybe it's about a character gaining their own independence and their own power, and they're taking charge of their lives. Or maybe it's about corruption. The character is doing something they know they shouldn't. I don't know. I don't want to judge anything. But if a story has sex in it for just sex sakes, then it's not literature probably, or at least that part of it isn't. It's more like something you'd find on parts of the internet you shouldn't go on. So, that's what I mean by some of the stuff we're talking about is going to be kind of awkward. And if there's ever something we're reading, whether it has to deal with sex, like I've just mentioned, or race, or something with sexism or violence, and you're not comfortable with it, please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to find alternatives. But also be willing to challenge yourself with these works, right? If it just makes you feel a little squeamish, face it. Literature is about humanity, right? This is a part of the human experience. But if it's something that makes you feel so squeamish that you can't get the work done, I don't want the stories to get in the way of your education. So I can and will help you find alternatives. So be willing to talk to me about it. I'm spending a lot of time talking about the first paragraph of my syllabus, so I'm going to move on. I'll get into more of this stuff later. You are going to be expected to read and compose. I'm never going to tell you to read a whole book in a week. That's crazy. You will have independent novels that you read, and I will give you essentially most of a quarter to read the novel at your own pace, and then to write an essay that'll be due at the end of the quarter. We'll do one soon. But I'm never going to assign a wildly long piece to read in a short amount of time. The thing that could happen is if you put stuff off, right? If I assign you to read a chapter of a book and the chapter's 30 pages long, maybe you have a couple days to do it, but if you put it off and it's a couple hours before, you're like, why did you assign so much? Well, it did over a course of a couple of days, so you would have enough time to complete it, and maybe other things, procrastination, work, whatever got in the way, and now it seems like you have a lot more. So I will always let you know how big a reading assignment is, and the longer the works, the longer you'll have to complete them. When it comes to composition, when you're writing for this class, the work that you submit as a final product, say a final draft of an essay, whether it's an informal poetry response or a more formal essay about a novel or some other work that we're reading, I'll expect you to revise those, right? I shouldn't, in an AP class, see somebody using the letter U for the word U, or the number 2, like Roman numeral 2, instead of, or not Roman numeral, that's 2. That was the Arabic numeral. So I shouldn't expect to see the number 2 instead of the word TO or TOO, right? Watch out for that stuff. We'll talk about contractions and how you shouldn't use them in formal writing, and making sure you know the difference between like would have, which is a thing, and would of, which is not often a thing. We'll talk a little bit about that, but mostly we focus on literature in this class and composition, not so much like grammar rules, although you can't escape it. Engagement, active participation. If you haven't made it to a class yet, please do make it to one soon. And when you are there and we actually have something to talk about, a poem, a short story, a novel, that we've read together. We haven't had that yet because school just started. But when we do, your active participation in the class is going to be a big part of both your success and the overall success of the class. It's much more enjoyable if you're engaging your mind and trying to think about whatever it is that we're tackling. If we're reading a poem and you're doing one of these, just kind of scrolling while we're reading together and discussing things, you're not going to get anything out of that. I talked about this old 90s show called Daria, where the main character during the opening sequence, she wasn't much of an athlete, but she's in gym class and a volleyball sales passed her, and she just puts her hand out like 30 seconds, not really 30 seconds, but a few seconds after the ball's passed by, like that. She's not having fun, right? Volleyball can be fun, even if you aren't very good at it, if you try. Anything can be fun if you try. So engaging yourself both in what we're reading and writing about and engaging yourself in the discussion that we have about it is going to make you like the class more. And I try to make it engaging when I'm not talking constantly. So please do. We have small classes and we'll have small group discussions. So hopefully there's not kind of that feeling of being overwhelmed by having too many people in the room. Both of my class sections are quite small, so we should be able to really get to know each other and have good discussions, whether it's remote or face-to-face. I talked about the book that you need. If you've missed the classes so far, you've missed me holding this up. This is a textbook that we're going to be using this year for the most part, especially while we're on remote. If you have not gone to material pickup yet, make sure you organize a way to get to the school to get this. Currently, you may know this already, the school is planning to return for hybrid learning September 8th, barring any changes. So that is something you should keep paying attention to. And if you come to class regularly, if it changes, I'll let you know. And if you haven't got your book by then, we'll make sure that you get one. Okay. We will have novels and short stories that we read, and I'll let you know ahead of time what novels we're going to read and when so that you can get your own copy, or I'll make sure that you have copies available through my classroom. This is a brief list of the assignments we're going to do. One of the things you'll see on a regular basis, well, there's three things really. You'll see poetry responses, which will happen every other week. I'll give you a collection of poems. You'll write an informal response. And it's a response to the poem. You can have some analysis, which I welcome, but it's also room for you to write about your personal response. You'll be able to use the first person and talk about how the poem made you feel, what it made you think about, and explain why a little bit. So those will be like every other week starting. We'll get the introduction to those next week. The other regular assignment will be vocab. If we were in class in person, I would give you vocab lists on a Friday. You would have a vocab, like I would give you the list of the words, and then on Monday the definitions for those words would be due, and then on Wednesday you would take a quiz. I'm going to follow that pattern as close as I can starting next week, where I'll give you a list of vocab words. When it comes to the quiz, I don't know how we're going to do those yet. If we're meeting in person, I'll give a normal vocab quiz because it's harder. You can't cheat, right? If I'm looking at you, you can't get your Google out and start looking for terms. If we're doing something online and we're still, if we're online completely remote like we are now, I'm going to find an alternative. Maybe it'll be something like where you invent sentences or you do a fill in the blank. But looking at definitions is a little too easy to cheat for a vocab quiz. The words that I choose are all going to be words that you'll see this year, just because they're often used in literature, poems, short stories that we'll look at. So they're words that you probably, maybe you've heard before, but they're going to see a lot that you probably haven't. And then the third piece of regular assignments are going to be independent novels. You'll have one of those to do each quarter. These first couple of quarters, I think I am going to encourage you more to read shorter works. So this first quarter for sure, because it's weird. So a play could work. But as we move into the second and third quarter, I'm going to ask you to look after some novels. The fourth quarter of the year, the final quarter, we won't have one of these to do. We'll be focused on test prep only, although I'm encouraging you to keep reading forever because books are amazing. So those are the three regular things. In class, we'll have a lot of other assignments. When we're looking at short stories and poetry, we'll have a lot of sort of analysis and response questions we'll work on together. But when we move into, we'll do some practice tests too that are multiple choice, modeled after, and sometimes they are direct AP test questions. Okay. Some guided questions here. We'll make these a part of the discussions we have as we move forward. Units of study. I didn't quite get to this today in the class session. We ran out of time because I talk so much. Unit 1 is going to focus on short stories. So we're going to be using that book I showed you earlier, the literature book. We'll have probably about at least 10, maybe 12 short stories that we'll read together and do some analysis for. Unit 2, so towards the end of this quarter and moving into the second quarter, we're going to focus on poetry. Um, if we're still meeting remotely, we'll be using the same book. If we start meeting in class, I have another book of poetry that is over there on my other desk. I'm not going to grab right now. But it's all the poetry will be provided for you, either digitally or through the textbooks. And same kind of idea. We'll read over 100 poems this year altogether. Sometimes we'll read 3 or 4 a day, and their poems can be pretty short, oftentimes. So you won't be reading pages and pages of poetry or anything like that. Although I encourage you to, because poetry is amazing. The third unit will focus on drama. So this is where we get into plays. We're going to read Sophocles' Oedipus Rex as sort of a introduction to like the classic tragedy, the 5 acts. You know, you've seen probably Freytag's Pyramid, the plot pyramid. We have the exposition, the inciting moment, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, denouement. And it's modeled after, well, it's tied intricately together with the classic Greeks, the sort of storytelling they did. From there, we'll see we'll see Hamlet from William Shakespeare, which was written, 1900 years later, probably, something about that, 1900 years after Oedipus Rex. So we'll say it's more modern, even though that was still written in late 1500s. And then we'll read, you'll have a choice. There'll be 3 plays. Currently, I've used Death of a Salesman, Fences, and Dollhouse. I think I might mix that up a little bit to include some more modern works. Although in those 3, Fences is fairly modern. It was written in the 1980s. It was also recently a film with Denzel Washington. I've never seen it. I don't know if it's very good. Play is very good, though. And then our 4th unit, final unit, will be the novel. We should absolutely read Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. The school has copies of those. I can get those to you. I am going to try this year to get enough copies of Toni Morrison's Beloved to teach that. It's one of my favorite books ever. I love Toni Morrison, and I beloved her books. So I have 5 or 6 copies of that now. I'm going to start looking at places like Half Price Books, used book sales, and see if I can get enough for all of us. And if any of you want to get your own copy so that you can have it and write in the margins and everything, I'll encourage you to do that too. That won't be until the 3rd quarter at the earliest, though, so we have some time to try to get copies of that book. Last year I taught Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. I think 2 people, maybe 3 people loved it. Everybody else either didn't read it or hated it. So I probably will cut this one out this year to make room for Toni Morrison's Beloved. But if we have time and there's enough interest from you guys, maybe we'll try to squeeze this one in too. I recommend it. It's wild. It's a Victorian novel, though, so the author sometimes takes, especially this one narrator in the book, he takes like 3 paragraphs to describe what a path looks like in the snow. And that's just sort of a Victorian era thing. And I think partly Emily Bronte is trying to show us something about that narrator when she makes him do that, but it's fun. I mean, narrators and characters are basically the puppets that the authors are pulling the strings for anyway, right? Okay, so that's the basics for what we're going to do this year. I talk a little bit about overview of like what we'll look at for grammar and the types of assignments we'll have, grading scale. I want to look down here at assignment deadlines. For major projects and papers, like the big independent novels we have, you can't turn it in late. I collect them at the end of the quarter, so there's just not enough time. But you'll know the due date months in advance. So if anything is getting in your way and it's getting close to the deadline, you're not going to be able to finish, let me know. Reach out as soon as you can. Please try to be on time, but I know life happens, and many of you have started working or you're continuing to work throughout this pandemic, and your schedule has changed quite a bit since school stopped becoming the normal thing. That can get in the way of turning assignments in on time. And if there's anything going on that I can help with, reach out to me. Please don't ever cheat, though, right? If you have an essay due and it's due in a couple of hours and you're tempted to start Googling to find papers to copy, don't do it, right? Reach out to me as soon as you can, and I will do whatever I can to help. In college, copying, plagiarism can get you kicked out. At the very least, kicked out of the class, but it potentially all the way out of the school. Academic dismissal does happen for these reasons. I will say that I've taught AP for 6 years now, and I think every year I catch 1 to 2 essays at the minimum that have been plagiarized. And part of it's fun, like the thrill of the chase for me, like, oh, this person thought they got away with something, but they didn't. But every time I catch somebody, there's just like this deep sadness that overcomes me because I feel so bad. Like, could I have done more to help them? Like, did I fail as a teacher? Is that why they plagiarized? Should I have reached out? Were they struggling and I didn't know it? So don't cheat because it makes me feel bad. Yeah, that's it. All right, I'll wrap this up now, I think. I will say this really quick. If you think I've messed up, please don't call me dumb or yell at me, right? Constructive criticism I respond well to. I do make mistakes pretty often, and I'm more than happy to own up to those and make the correction, right? So if you think something's wrong, let me know. I'm not going to just ignore any kind of criticisms I get. I will do whatever I can to make the world a better place, starting with my class. I also have the notes for how our class is weighted here. We'll talk more about that as we start having some of the assignments, but you can see it on the syllabus now. And that is more probably than what I covered in class today. That's most of it. That's all of it, at least. On Monday, when we meet again, we'll talk. I already had it listed as course overview and syllabus. We'll just kind of get started. We'll have a poem that we look at. This agenda will be updated this weekend. We're probably going to look at a fun poem called The Death of a Toad. So, toads, that's fun. Okay, hope you guys have had a great first week, not feeling too overwhelmed, and I will see you all Monday. Okay, bye.